It's Tehachapod time. Key Budge, Greg Garrett, Corey Costello. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing good, Key. Thank you.
Fantastic.
It's nice to have all three of us back. Ashley sat in your seat last week, Greg, so I know you had to come in and make some adjustments, change the seating, the microphone, your headphone levels.
Were too low.
Everything. I missed a couple of these, and I'm just thrown to the curb.
Ashley didn't want to hear us. She's like, turn the headphones down. She's really low. I don't want to hear these guys.
Ashley
But she did a great job.
She did. Yeah. She did. And she's very much at home sitting in the host seat.
Yes.
So it was.
So you guys both look out.
Yeah, I know. I could get pushed out. I don't want to teach her how to edit.
I think it's cool that we have.
Maybe I'll be out.
Pretty cool that we have 4 hosts that we can, kind of translate around.
It allows us to record more too, because sometimes I can't make it, Greg can't make it, and so now we always have some staff available to be on mic and be able to when we can get guests like we have today.
That's right. I think the thing that we've kind of talked about is having the female perspective. We look at who's listening, who's paying attention, who's following us on our different social medias, including our podcast, and it's 2-to-1 women.
So as soon as you invited Ashley, our number spiked?
No, not saying that. But I'm saying that it's definitely, matter of fact, Greg, you and I had a conversation at the 9/11 Remembrance ceremony just the other day at the rodeo grounds with someone who came up and said they listened to TehachaPod and they really loved hearing the female voice.
And it was a female, and she wanted to take a photo with you.
She did.
That was pretty cool. See, now Corey's getting jealous
he's
already.
blushing. No, I'm just laughing. His cheeks are getting red. He's blushing.
No, it's really cool.
That was Kara. Very nice. But she said that she really enjoyed hearing Ashley and having that female perspective. So it kind of solidifies the reasons that we did.
She's a part-time resident, so she's LA/West Golden Hills. And I think today we have a similar situation going on. Yeah.
We do. We have a special guest in studio, Mr. Thom Mills. Tom, welcome to Tehachapod.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate you bringing me in today to talk a little bit about the project we just did here, and it's very exciting.
This project that we're going to talk about today is 452, the Tehachapi Earthquake. This film that you created debuted at the Hitching Post Theater. I loved having our own little red carpet event here at the Hitching Post with the debut and how it all came together. And that's what we want to share, because the film is available for purchase through the Heritage League at the museum. Tom, let's learn a little bit about you. How long have you been a part of Tehachapi, living here with the family as you're able to?
Yeah, well, our story is a little, I don't know if it's unique or not, but this is our second go-around in Tehachapi. So originally, I'd say 16 years ago, my wife and I took a ride up into the country from LA, because we were always looking for our nature excursions to get out of the city. We drove up here. We had a friend who lived, I believe, in Stallion Springs at the time. She had told us about Tehachapi. We drove through this quaint, beautiful little town. We thought, oh, how sweet this is. And we continued driving. We ended up in Bear Valley, somehow got through the gate. I don't know.
Wait. I thought that was secure.
It was, but I think we may have stopped at the police station for a bathroom break or something, and we were in. Anyway, we drove around, and by the end of that weekend, we'd bought a home in Bear Valley Springs.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, and we absolutely loved it. And we were coming up basically 2 weeks of the month. Our work is in Los Angeles, but we were coming up here as often as possible. And as we said, we started breathing when we got, sort of about Palmdale, Lancaster, right after, and saw the mountains. So we lived here for 7 years, and then we adopted our daughter from Vietnam, and we were spending 3.5 weeks per month in Los Angeles, and we just weren't getting here enough. And then she got to school age, the parties on the weekends. So we finally reluctantly sold our home in Bear Valley, and as we were driving away, we were like, what are we doing? This is insane. Fast forward to just at the beginning of COVID, where no one was going anywhere, and we said this might be an opportunity for us to come back. Our daughter was a little older now, a little interested in nature, came back up to Tehachapi again, talked to a real estate agent, and bought our home, and we've been back for 3 years now.
That's great. Tehachapi attracts great people.
Thank you. Yeah, we just adore it up here, and it was so interesting that this is our second go-around. We've seen so much in town. When we came before, it seemed like a very small town. And now it seems like this burgeoning arts community, great restaurant community, still small, quaint feel, but so much going on now that we perhaps just didn't notice the first time around.
Tehachapi has grown. As Greg, you always talk about the sophistication. That is what you see, the maturity as things go, that we have. And we offer different things, but things are people are noticing.
Frankly, why we moved back, I mean, myself, we moved back, 6 years ago, and other friends that I know that went to high school here and left like I did and went and had a world experience elsewhere. But we realized that, Tehachapi grew up. It matured, and there were now things for our kids to do, and there was things for opportunities for us, and the stuff that before you just had to leave and go make your career somewhere else. And so, yeah, that maturity is a big part of why there's a lot of the returners, as I call them, back in town now because of that.
It didn't happen by accident. I started the city 20 years ago, and a lot of people, not just City Hall, but I'm talking about this city and this community had a vision. And we've been working on this vision and put pen to paper and created a plan. And the plan is coming to fruition, right? And we've still got a lot to do. Don't make no mistake. There's a lot to do, but we have this country sophistication. Yes. I'm very proud of it.
I'll just mention that a couple of things really stood out to me when we came back. One was the amazing signage, which is so organic and beautiful and inviting. And aside from that, I remember when we were here before, I'd mentioned the name of Tehachapi, and I'd always get that sort of look like, oh, I've heard of that, but I don't know. Now when I mention Tehachapi to people, it's like, oh, yeah, you're up in Kern County. So there is an awareness out there of this city that I didn't notice before.
It's awesome.
It speaks volumes of the hard work that's gone in to do these things and that people do pay attention. Before we started recording, Thom and I were having conversations about how we've grown here in our communications effort. And then COVID kind of has changed things. It brings you back because it's an opportunity. Your daughter's was doing this probably virtual school, I'm sure. Yeah. So able to attend her LA schools here through Kern County.
That's right.
Talk about a little bit about your background because we want to talk about the film 452, the Tehachapi Earthquake that we got a chance to see. I know Greg and I saw it. Corey, have you seen it?
I've not seen it yet. No.
Okay.
It's on my list.
Yeah, we were invited to the premiere. I guess you were not. How did that work?
I had 14 other community meetings to be at that night. Sorry.
Divide and conquer.
Someone has to do something while Greg goes and watches film. Someone has to go cover him somewhere else in the community.
But,
hey, look at that.
He gets a
sucker. Now I got a copy.
We need to get an autographed copy of that.
I want this signed.
Dang it, I didn't even get one of those.
Yeah, y'all should have kept your mouth shut. That's what happens.
Oh, you can't keep that, Corey. That was just...
He's a loner, right?
It's just the box. There's nothing inside.
It's like a Blockbuster, right? You got to take it to the front. That's awesome.
So, Thom, you created your own film business. You've got Trispect Films that's based in Los Angeles. Let's talk a little bit about Trispect Films, what you do, and then that'll merge right into this conversation about the creation of 452, I'm pretty sure.
I've always been a filmmaker. I've been in various areas of show business, from writing to stage management to assistant directing up to directing. So I was always the aspiration was always to be a writer-director. And as a freelancer there, you can throw a stick down the street in Los Angeles County and you'll hit 5 directors. So it's not a very unique profession in that area. So I was just another guy trying to get work. I found out along the way that clients or potential clients were much more interested in working with a company if we had some skin in the game. And I began to think about how can I just get beyond being another freelancer to opening my own company. So over a period of about 5 years, I did that. We became franchised. We became registered with government agencies to do government films. We became fully insured and bonded, all those things. And suddenly my company started getting return phone calls that I was not getting as an individual director. So I went full force into just basically developing my company since 2016. And that's brought me work in Los Angeles County and recently in Kern County.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when you say films, they think Top Gun or, stuff like that. But there's so many films to be made. Yeah. A lot of work in that industry.
And so when we move here to 452, how did this all come together?
Well,
I mean, here you are. You're a film producer. You're a director. You work corporate films to documentaries. And then you live here in Bear Valley. What happened?
Okay, so one day I made a call to Mr. Greg Garrett, and I said I'd like to. This is when I had recently just moved back up here. I'd like to. This city is so inspiring to me that I want to do something for the city. So
can I stop you there?
Yeah.
So I get these calls all the time.
I got that impression.
And when I spoke with Thom, I'm like, I was very kind, I think, and polite, and listened.
Yes.
But at the end, I thought, I think this guy might be legit. And here we are today, right? So good thing I didn't say, oh, don't call me again.
Now you
But
were,
that's not who I am, and that's not what we do here, of course.
yeah, and you were so welcoming. But you did tell me that. You said, I've had a few calls like this in the
I
past.
did.
Yes, you did.
I
Very,
did.
very
Okay,
politely.
I'm
But usually
an
there's
honest guy,
usually
too.
there's a funding ask on the other end as well, right? People will say, "I want to do this, but can you give me $10,000 to do
People
it?"
like
It's
the city to fund all kinds of fun stuff, and that's
Naturally.
not who we are, right? We're about the core services.
Yeah.
But
Well, your phone call was very encouraging, ultimately. And I said to Greg in the call that I'd like to, I think I used the term, give a gift to the city. I'd like to make a tourism film for Tehachapi. And at some point when it's finished, I'm not going to put any timeline on it because it was a project that I was doing between gigs. I'll like to hand it to the city, and you can put it on your website if you like it. You can put it in the visitor center, or you can just show it at home on Thanksgiving. It doesn't matter. I just want to do something as a gift for thanking the city for allowing us to live here. Hopefully it's of a level that the city would like. So I began to do this film. I'm still doing it. I'm hoping to be done by December. One of the stops along the way was the Tehachapi Museum. And I went in there and I shot for half a day and started talking to Judy Reynolds over there. And she said, "Oh, my goodness, we've been looking to do a film about the Tehachapi Earthquake. You should talk to Charles White, president of the Tehachapi Heritage League." Charles and I met, and within 2 months, we had a contract to do the film.
you just mentioned two names, Charles White and Judy Reynolds. Both are superstars when it comes to the Heritage League. They give. They volunteer. Work at the museum behind the scenes. And if they want to do something, they want to set their mind to it, they'll get it done, and they found the right partner.
It's important too. I think you bringing those folks up and to do a film like this, and we'll get into more details. But we've got to start looking at that next generation of people to keep that history going. We've spoken with John Hammond on this podcast, right? Yeah. A walking encyclopedia of everything Tehachapi. But, John will be here forever. Charles will be here forever. And so it's important to keep passing that stuff down, that knowledge down. I realize from the earthquake, if you go back, and I spent a little bit of time at the Heritage League, and you look at stuff, there's a fascinating Tehachapi history that is out there that doesn't get as much press as, say, the earthquake. But those folks have kind of an idea on it. And when you go to the Heritage League and you check it out and you read about things, and you're just, wow, that didn't know that was the case. And I didn't know that the railroad used to stage baseball games on 4th of July and bring teams up from Bakersfield and that kind of stuff. It's interesting to see that history of what, where we used to mine limestone and that kind of stuff. It's important to keep films like this out there because that'll help the next generation of kids, keep that history alive in the future.
So true. And the history has to be kept alive. And the earthquake, as I said, when we had the screening, my experience with interviewing a lot of people, survivors of the quake, people that, person's child was talking about their mother or father. Most people that I met in Tehachapi and talking about the quake that were 35-ish or younger were sort of like me, didn't know anything about the earthquake. Mm-hmm. Of course, people 50 and up did. So I thought, yeah, and what you're saying is you have to keep the history alive or the history can be forgotten very quickly.
Well, the problem is history repeats itself, not necessarily an earthquake, but you look at the Roman Empire, the rise and fall of this and that and this and that. And if we could just learn from history, right? So we've put in some safety measures for earthquakes and different things, but history is so vital to the health of your future.
Yes.
Looking back and learning.
And then we understand more context too. I mean, we had this conversation with John Hammond a little bit, but the hospital was destroyed in the 1952 earthquake. And then what they built out of that a few years later in 1954 was the old Tehachapi Hospital that just got knocked down. But we realized that was one of the first projects. It was one of the first projects, rebuilding projects after the 52 earthquake. So they just thought, how are we going to make this safe? We're going to cast in place concrete this thing and build it like a bunker. And so they went to knock it down some 70 years later. They went, we can't knock this down with just a backhoe.
We need an earthquake.
This thing will not budge. And even when the hospital district looked to reuse the building, they're like, we can't really reuse this. This thing is literally a concrete bunker. And so, little things that you learn from that history, because then we try to get very safe with our earthquakes and nothing above a couple stories downtown. And then let's just pour extra concrete on top of everything to make it safe. And
and the funny thing is they used it right before they did tear it down. They used it for production of a film.
They did, yeah.
Okay. Which is one of your colleagues.
What film was that?
New Walt.
It's the New Walt, New Walt, kind of a short film / series. And actually, the Paul Winston, the director, kind of like you,
Producer,
director,
actor.
actor,
He lives in
producer.
Tehachapi also.
And
Yeah.
he's looking to start a screening here soon. He wants to do a screening in Tehachapi since he shot several scenes here, both in the city and outside the
We
city.
should start
So-
a little production facility up here, right?
Well,
and rent the space out. Wouldn't that be cool?
That's my
Soundstage?
dream. We should talk
Okay.
about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's get into 452.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had the conversation with Charles. You're under contract, and then where does it go? Does he kind of brief you on this, and then you start to do some research, or where was the? We've got a thought, an idea of what the Heritage League wanted to produce here in 2022. It's the 70th anniversary. What's our time frame? When did you guys first have this conversation?
So I think I met Charles about November of 21. And he impressed upon me right away that the anniversary was coming up. So we definitely had a hard out when this had to be finished, which meant once the board approved the film, we had to move fast. So we met in November. Charles and I had coffee a few times in December, talked about what the film might look like. He went to the board, I think, late December. And by mid-January, we had confirmation from the board with my general overview of how I saw the film. It changed quite a bit over time, but by mid-January we were under contract with the hope to be done by July 2022, the 70th anniversary.
Now we've got COVID going on also.
Mm-hmm.
What did that do for you as a filmmaker? And I mean, Kern County is much different than LA County. So was it a little easier to operate here and put things together, or were the guidelines and the timetable, and you got 6 months to try and get this project, to the end? That's not very much time.
It's really not, especially for something like this. Ironically, the smaller the project, the harder it is. Maybe that's not so ironic, but when you have a smaller project, you don't have people you can go to do things. So I sort of initially, anyway, had to do everything myself. But to answer your first question, given that COVID was still pretty prevalent at that point, it made things a little easier for me because there weren't other projects that I was dealing with right then and there. It gave me time to write this, rewrite it again, show it to Charles, get approvals, et cetera, et cetera. So it opened up my calendar, as it were, to make it feasible to do it, and then rework the structure of it, which we can talk about if you'd like.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we both worked in media, Corey, you and I, and we understand all of a sudden you start getting pulled in different directions.
Yeah.
And this allowed you to stay focused.
It really, really was. It was the only project I worked on for, I'd say, a 3.5 month period.
We were very busy during the COVID period, especially during the LA County either shutdowns or highly regulated filming in Los Angeles County. A lot of the studios were given permission to go no further than about 150-mile radius, 200-mile radius, and that's what they were limited to. And so we got a lot of calls. We had a lot of things shot up here.
Yeah.
We had Amazon filmed a couple commercials, and then a few other things that came out. Some scene selectors came out to look us up because they said, look, we need something that looks like this, but we can't go to that right now. It's outside of our sphere. And a lot of folks were surprised how easy it was to film, especially in the city. I mean, if folks aren't looking for giant road closures, we're not charging a ton of fees and permits and that sort of thing. And some folks were even in disbelief. They said, "That's it?" I said, "Well, that's it. What do you plan on doing?" "Now we're going to film on the sidewalk." "You should be fine then. No worries about the police department." "No, that's it."
Well, a couple of weeks ago, we had Paramount in town.
Yeah.
350 employees for about 2+ weeks.
Yeah.
So we can't let the cat out of the bag yet.
Well, they did mention that they were filming. They were filming at the old Level 1 yard at CCI.
Don't say too much.
That's all I can say.
okay.
But when that thing
Good
closed,
teaser.
what did we tell CCI? We said that would make a great film area. I mean, everybody's always prison movies, whatever it might be.
Production
What
facility,
a great
right?
spot. And sure enough,
It's like when you go to the Port of LA, you see all these production companies running around with all the containers and chase scenes and different things. Tehachapi has all kinds of.
Now, if you're going to film a chase scene, though, you're going to need a few more permits than
you might need
what Tom needed to film this. But it's a different story.
I mean, we were obviously going to film at Tehachapi. It was a Tehachapi film. But with that said, we probably wouldn't have been able to do this in LA. And here's why. A call to Greg Garrett was, "Greg, I'd love to shoot in front of the BK. Couldn't we do that?" "Well, how long are you going to be there? What's going to happen?" And I explained it, and he said, "Yep. So, okay, so where do I go for the permits, and when do I have to talk to the police chief, and et cetera, et cetera?" "No, we're good." Now, I wouldn't expect that for Paramount necessarily, but for me, low budget filmmaker, it was a blessing.
Well, part of my job is to make calculated risk decisions every day. And, we evaluate situations, and certainly permits sometimes are required, street closures are required. But what you explained to me was very straightforward and very safe. I was there, and you were using local talent, which was, TCD, Tehachapi Community Theater, Friends of Tehachapi Depot folks. So it was a true community project. So.
Yeah, and that was so super important to me. I didn't want to bring actors in from LA. I knew there was a great talent base here. I found some crew here, some people that had no film experience, some people that had a little bit. They were wonderful, and it was important to me to use as many people as we could that was practical from the area, and we found great people.
And the interesting part, too, a big part of that film was, the BK Theater, which was one of the few buildings that didn't have a lot of damage, but then it just went away, and it wasn't the BK for the longest time. It was several other things. And then, when that didn't work out, Greg's first project in the city was to make it the BK again. And so it's just kind of funny. You come back and it looks like it looked in 1952, it's not the same. It's definitely not the same building or the same sign, but it's amazing that I got to be in the film after a couple different machinations of it. So.
For sure.
Yeah. And all the various, the evolution of the script, obviously I wanted to utilize as many buildings that still stood, that looked similar. BK was the obvious choice. Train Depot, of course, and a few other spots. But we were limited, and I guess the Tall Mark building. So we wanted to make sure we showcased those buildings because it was an obvious creative choice to be able to show before and after the few buildings that did survive.
Yeah.
I know when watching the film that night, I love the fact that you were able to use some historical photographs, recreate, and it was that blending from a still into
I thought that was
live.
super cool. It looked so real.
Very creative.
The blending was, the photo and then putting the guy in the bed. I don't want to give it up yet. We need to buy the video.
But going from black and white into color and that transition and feel, it flowed very nicely, and I was able to kind of follow it, and you start to kind of feel, as you're trying to recreate, a true event.
Yes.
So what's that process like? I mean, is this something that you envisioned prior to, whether it's in the original script or your rewrites, or, how does that all kind of take place?
Well, I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to make a dusty museum film that we've all seen before. And those films can be very informative, but I wanted to do something, I don't really want to use the word entertaining, but something that would hold an audience's interest, younger people in particular. So one of the things I said to Charles, if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure that we try and find some stories from the day and recreate them with actors. And this is not going to be wall-to-wall performance. It's going to be lean heavily on the archival footage that we have and the photographs. That's the most important. That's the reality. And then we'll find some stories that hopefully were emotional, moving, representative of what people were going through, and we'll combine those into the story along with narration and music. And Charles bought right in from the beginning and said that's a good approach. And the museum's only care was that what we put on film represented what actually happened. And I think we did that.
Yeah,
you did it well.
In September, being Emergency Preparedness Month, and in my career, I've done a lot of emergency preparedness and talking about earthquakes. And I remember doing a presentation here in Tehachapi a few years ago, researching the 52 quake and looking at some of that footage. And, when you go to the USGS site and you see, oh my gosh, the Tehachapi earthquake, it's not like I had to go dig very deep because it was such an impactful earthquake in our history.
Yes.
It's right there. Anything shocking about the level of magnitude that this earthquake and what it did, and what you all of a sudden, because if you're in LA, you know about the Northquake quake, you know about the Sylmar quake, but no one talks about the Tehachapi quake.
So many things, Key. Number one, that it was the second most powerful earthquake in California recorded history. That alone is pretty impressive. It was the most powerful earthquake in Southern California history. Bear Mountain rose over 3 feet, maybe as high as 6 feet. $23 million in 1952 money on agricultural damage. It was historic. And as we say in the film, Tehachapi went from a small town, unknown to many people, to the number one news story of that summer. Internationally, These were headlines in Japan, in England. This was a historic event that somehow, and I'm not still quite sure, largely has been kind of forgotten. And I don't really know why, but maybe it's just the increased media that we have in the world. People don't really think about what happened 70 years ago. I do know that the earthquake has sort of gotten to be conflated with the event that happened a year later in Bakersfield, which was also was actually an aftershock to the Tehachapi quake, 5.8 there, 7.5 the quake we had here. So I think putting those two earthquakes together in some way has kind of lessened the Tehachapi earthquake, which was a historic event. And frankly, it's not even really known as a Tehachapi earthquake. I think there should be legislation saying what this was. We know the Northridge earthquake was a Northridge earthquake. This was 75 times more powerful than the Northridge earthquake. And I hope the government at some point of the state says, let's identify this for what it is.
I think that's all population driven, though. You know, when you talk about L.A. or Bakersfield, it's all about people. You know, at the time, Tehachapi had maybe 10,000 in total. Yeah, a lot of damage downtown. And you talk about the agriculture. You're referring to down in the Bakersfield, the San Joaquin Valley area, where the water wells were drilled. Yeah, the ground moves. It cuts that pipeline, if you will. I'm not explaining this very well, but you know, you can't pump water to irrigate your growing season, and so the financial loss with agriculture was huge down in the valley.
I've also heard too on the other side of the Antelope Valley that sort of shifting water table, you know, the Antelope Valley, and there is still a little bit of farming if you take, you know, the back way, so to speak, Willow Springs Road into Lancaster Pond, but there's a little bit of agriculture there. But you'll see a lot of former areas that used to be ag land. You can see some of the old wells and that sort of thing, some of the flood irrigating devices that aren't used anymore. You know, I'd heard that's actually sort of shifted that water table enough to where there wasn't enough groundwater anymore to farm that area. So there was a change there. And even just from the you know, talk about the media coverage, this was kind of transformational on that end too. I know I think it was the first time that it was KTLA actually was 5. Able to be live in 1952. That technology was very new. This is the first time able to send images from 200 miles away or 150 miles away to Los Angeles to be broadcast. And so this was the first time they used some of that technology. And so it was transformative in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, and I'd heard from, I guess, Nick Smirnoff was telling me how they actually did that. And I guess if it was the first broadcast on KTLA, certainly one of the first, maybe the first, they parked the trucks about every 50 or 75 miles away and bounced the signals.
Repeaters,
boom,
boom, boom.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, and it took, unfortunately, an event like this for that to be the first.
It was really interesting to me that a geologist came to the premiere and spoke and talked about the faults and the fault lines and different things. And people put a lot of emphasis on the San Andreas. And make no mistake, it's going to rip someday, I'm sure. We always think about the San Andreas, and you overlook all of these other faults. In our case, it was the White Wolf. Is that right?
Yes.
It only breached the ground for a couple miles and then kind of dove down. And geologists at the time had no idea that it was such a large fault. Now we do, of course. Same thing in Ridgecrest, I think, a couple of years ago in their July 4th and 5th quakes. That was a big learning experience for that community.
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly how many miles the White Wolf Fault is, but it is a micro fault compared to the Garlock and the San Andreas. But yes, they've discovered recently that it is longer than they thought, most of it underground. But if you look at it, any map of it, it doesn't look like the kind of fault line that would cause such a devastating quake, but of course it did.
So as you're doing your research and you've talked with Charles, the Encyclopedia John Hammond probably comes into play a little bit. And I know John was there at the premiere to talk a little bit, and we've had him on the podcast.
He just wrote about that garbage dump that he talked about on our podcast too. Right. He just wrote about his recent column was about the old earthquake garbage dump by his home.
Exactly. So working with John and his historical knowledge, I mean, it is impressive to listen to him talk and be able, in his ability to recall information, from his brain is. It's beyond me. He's got so much information to share. Yeah. You've probably got to narrow down and go, okay, I really am in tune with this story or whatever it is that he was sharing.
Well, I'm going to have to be completely honest with you here. I didn't meet John until we were already shooting the movie. Most of the information that I got about the quake was either from historical documents, newspaper reports, people that we interviewed, Charles, the museum, their exhibit that they have there now. John, I met the day we were filming the movie, and we chatted for a bit, and we were busy that day filming. And at the night of the premiere, obviously. So really, John was not actively involved in the making.
On the creative
and
side.
I wish he was. But
it was a great pull to bring him in, there at the premiere to be able to talk, because it really he added even more stories that you wouldn't have had time to include.
The Okie Doke story is my favorite one. The drunk guy that they thought was dead, but he just drank so much the night before he slept through the earthquake, and they thought he died. Then he just woke up. I mean, you can't. Right over here at the old Summit Lime, which is just on the other side.
He was probably thinking, man, that was a good drink.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that was my favorite earthquake story of all.
And then you pull in Emily, your geologist, and she helps tell that story from that scientific point of view.
Yeah, Emily was incredible. She is a regular guest on Bakersfield news channels, when Channel 17, I believe, when there's an earthquake. Mm-hmm. And she's brilliant and very accessible and warm, not in any way scientific. And she just has a way of winnowing down the technical aspects of quakes and making them very accessible. So she was the first person I called, and we met and we hit it off immediately. And next thing we knew, we were standing by the White Wolf Vault shooting. And she was a great resource to me, and so great to have her at the screening as well.
Yeah. And how was it in finding, historical footage? When Key was out right around the anniversary, I put together a little video knowing the anniversary was coming. Yeah. So I'm going to put something together for our social media real quick. We pulled the audio from John's appearance on the podcast, and I was able to find some historic stuff quite a bit because of all the news coverage. And it's funny, I think I was showing my wife the video, and my kindergarten son saw it, and he goes, is Tehachapi broken? And I'd explained to him that it was a long time ago in an earthquake, and every once in a while he was like, were you around when Tehachapi was broken? He refers to Tehachapi being broken. But what was it like, kind of diving in and finding, was it easy to find that footage, or was it a little more difficult trying to match the shots you were looking for?
Well, the museum had an incredible amount of photographs, first off. I would say 500 photos that I basically could pour through, which very much informed the script that we wrote. And they had some amazing early video footage, some home movies. I'm sure you've seen a lot of this footage, and some is in our movies. And a lot of old newscast stuff. Actually, not newscast stuff from 10 years after, 20 years after, news specials that we were able to get some footage from. So we had so much archival footage to work with that the film went from being, the original description was that it was going to be a 7 to 12-minute film. I ended up making a 20-minute film just because we had so much material. Mm-hmm. And it could have been 30 minutes, but we had to stop at some point. So,
what do you think about the city investing in different things, aspects? We were talking about money earlier, budgets. The city purchased software equipment for the Heritage League and the depot some years ago so that we could start archiving this. We talk about the importance of history. We felt at the city that was an important investment to be able to purchase that and allow the volunteers to go start archiving, and voila, here we go. We have items at our fingertips that are cataloged so that it makes it easier to do research.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine if I had to have spent 1,000 hours over the past year going down to Bakersfield and just pouring through newspaper files. I mean, it was there.
And the people that you interviewed, the old timers that were here during that time, they were, of course, youngsters at the time. That was very interesting to me also.
Yeah, as I said at the screening, Greg, I think they really were the heart of the film, and there's few left. It's kind of similar to making a documentary about World War II. We're running out of time, and we had some amazing people. Pat Gracie, Joe Fontaine was a firefighter at the time, Peggy Richardson, and Mary Chaidez, who were kids. Peggy's parents owned a hotel, which was right on the railroad tracks, so they thought a train had come through their living room. Mary was a typical 12-year-old kid living life in Tehachapi, loving it. Was invited to stay with the Martin family that night. Good friends of the Martin family. Her mother said, no, not this weekend. And another friend went, and the Martin family passed away, many of them.
That was a tragic situation. I had no idea that nearly the entire family was gone.
Yeah, nearly the entire family. And, of course, Pat Gracie, another historian who was in her 20s, I believe, and a young mom. And Pat had a great story which didn't make it into the movie, but she remembered she was holding her baby, and this woman was screaming, and she kept thinking, I wish this woman would stop yelling during the earthquake, and then she realized it was herself.
Wow.
Wow. Pat writes for The Loop every once in a while, a guest article.
And this is why, too, every once in a while, I mean, I know with, our late Mayor Ed Grimes, before he passed away, Greg it's told Key, go sit down with Ed and just get him on film. Let him talk a little bit about his history in the city. And we've done that in the past with some people just to get them on film. So at least we have something, and maybe we can draw from it one day if we need it, but it's out there. And it's, you want to make sure we live in an era now where it's a lot easier to capture that stuff than it used to be. So I think we try to take advantage as much as we can and get that stuff, on film and archive some way or the other.
What are some of the facts that you brought forward in the documentary? We've talked about the magnitude of the earthquake, but some of the other moments and things that occurred through that day that you learned and you shared that people weren't aware of.
Gosh, so many Key. I'm trying to think of the things that made me go, wow. But I guess like one thing that stood out to me was we went from a town of, Greg, you said maybe 10,000 people at the time.
Yeah, total community.
Right, to a very crowded city the next day. The media sensation, the gawkers, the media, the rescuers. But that morning, before the sun rose, the community had come together so much already, had made rescues, had been digging people out with their fingertips, were there supporting each other, feeding each other, holding each other. So just that power of a community that relied on itself in those first hours to come together very much, to me, exemplifies what Tehachapi is about today. It's a bigger place, but I still feel that sense of community that existed. So that stood out to me. I guess another aspect was that you looked at the buildings that were destroyed, 70% of downtown, and that helped to lead to many of the modern rules and regulations for building that we just take for granted today. But that some people had the foresight, the BK and the buildings we mentioned already, to have rebar and already had built a reinforced concrete versus unreinforced brick. So that's those are a couple of things that come to mind.
And we get better every time there's a disaster. I think the Ridgecrest earthquake was a great example too. I mean, there wasn't a lot of damage to the civilian areas. Some of the older 1940s era hangars on China Lake, Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake, were certainly damaged. But in Ridgecrest proper, modern building codes, as much as they can be a pain for a lot of people, those tend to save lives when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
So.
And I just thought of another one, actually. I mean, they're going to probably start popping in my head now in the rebuilding. Another movie should be made solely about how they rebuilt the Tehachapi, the tunnels, the train tunnels. I mean, 1,000 people came in here and over the process of a month to 2 months rebuilt destroyed tunnels. It's unprecedented. This is one of the great projects in modern American history, how quickly those railroads were reopened, the lifeblood of moving product throughout California.
Yeah, the amount of labor and money that they spent on those tunnels was unprecedented to open the line. I've said many times, Tehachapi is a little slice of the Midwest. And I mean that with all due respect to California, but certainly when we talk about community, that is Tehachapi. We are all about each other and neighbors and getting it done. So appreciate the comment, but also the acknowledgement that you saw it and you felt it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was even the point. We've talked about this in the past, was there was very little aid given to Tehachapi after.
There was no FEMA.
There was no FEMA. There was, and some of the attention had gone to some of the other communities, but there wasn't even a lot of insurance money to replace that stuff. It didn't exist. And so that was basically rebuilt by people and by the community. And there was no Red Cross rolling in. They had the Red Cross a little bit for some medical, but there wasn't what we have today in terms of response and resources. And so that had to come into people doing it, themselves. And we go back to any disaster. We've talked about this a lot. We're going to have to be self-reliant on the Hill.
Yeah.
And we know even from a city standpoint, like you pointed out, Tehachapi became very busy overnight. Should something like that, again, a lot of folks are going to look to the city, even though they may not live in the city. The resources might be here. And so we might have to deal with an influx of a lot more people coming in for resources in the city as opposed to some of the unincorporated communities around us. So those are all things you take from those sort of experiences and you look and try to prepare better for them in the future.
Yeah, indeed.
And the film 452, the earthquake struck at 4:52 in the morning.
I was going to mention that, Key. I think we need to clarify that 4:52 a.m. Hence the name of the movie 452.
Well, I'm looking at the box and it does say 4:50.
right.
So 4:52.
We should have put AM.
So when we did
AM,
when we
yeah.
did the when we
Well,
did
you did here.
when
Oh,
we
is it up there?
when we released the video, I had scheduled to go out at 4:50. I don't know if anyone caught that, but if you go back to our Facebook page and the video that went out on July 20th, it was released at 4:52 a.m. I made sure that that's when it posted to social media.
You're clever.
Pretty clever. I don't think anybody caught it.
That's
Goodness.
groundbreaking.
Anyone? Yeah, no one caught that but me. But I did it for obvious reasons. So.
It's interesting though, because one of the things that I mean, in this even with the museum, when I was going through all the archival footage, there'd be photographs of the old Juanita Hotel, and then the BK, and then there'd be a photo of a downtown shop in Bakersfield. So I started looking at these photos, and I realized that I had to be very careful that I was choosing things that were Tehachapi. And when you started talking to people about the earthquake, if you look back at the old newspaper reports, the earthquake was 7.3, it was 7.5, it was 7.7. It happened at 4:51 a.m. It happened at 4:53, and 11 people died, 8 people died, 12 people died. So I was kind of pulling hair from here out of my ears to find out the truth. And then as the years pass, the stories start to get a little fuzzy with people. So we had to, find the best answers based on what we think was accurate.
I think we could settle on 4:52.
Yeah. Well, even when we spoke to John Hammond, right? He talked about the death toll, and he said, well, actually, one guy was driving, the water tower fell over, wall of water hit his car, wife got injured in the back, died from injuries several years down the road. And he's like, well, does that count, towards the death toll? Officially, no.
Right.
But there may have been another one, or maybe a few more of those people out there that had injuries.
We explored that a little bit, and at some point we had to stop because there was a woman in Long Beach who had a heart attack.
Yeah.
So some people include her in the death toll, but we ended up focusing on the people that were here in Tehachapi, and one gentleman who was a laborer in Arvin.
There you go.
Yeah, and we figured let's keep it about Tehachapi and the region.
Did you reach out to Tehachapi Community Theater for talent?
I did. Yeah.
And then what was their response? Was it an immediate yes? How can we be involved, or what was it?
Like everybody we talked to in Tehachapi, including Greg first, everybody welcomed us with open arms. I called TCT and I said, Chris Morales and David Faber, and said, we're going to be doing a film up here. I'd love to audition some of your actors. Do you think you have enough actors? We have probably 8 to 10 roles. Of course, we have many actors. Great. So I'll be contacting you. Well, why don't you do the auditions here? Okay, great. Thank you. I have a budget on this, so can you give me an idea? It's no budget. It's free. Again, could not happen in LA. So yes, they brought amazing talent to us. They gave us the theater for a day to do auditions. Would have given us a theater for a screening had the Hitching Post not been so generous to allow us to do it there. So that was another example. Another example was Larry Christie at the WM facility. We needed to find some area of town that looked like it could have been an earthquake. They have large piles of rubble over there. Called Mr. Christie up. We'd love to film at your facility. Greg helped with this as well. Would that be possible? Yes. Okay. The depot. We'd love to shoot one of our recreations here at the depot. Can we take an hour on a day you're closed and do that? Yes. Would you like some of our people to be in the movie? They became our actors. So It was just impossibly great all across the board.
You get through and you're going, okay, I'm not in LA.
Yeah.
That's kind of a nice little takeaway is this isn't the way it's done in other places.
That's the point. I think a lot of people in LA think the world ends at Van Nuys. Yeah. Actually, the world starts at Van Nuys.
Yeah, we even had we had an Amazon production up here when they filmed an episode of Bosch, or at least a piece of Bosch. You remember that they wanted to close. They wanted to use the Tehachapi Police Department. We were in the script, and they wanted. Of course, I love the show, so I always do whatever they want. But they wanted to close real briefly in front of the at sundown, just driving in front of the police department. And we said, yeah, no problem. They said, well, what's going to cost to close the road? And I said, there's like 5 cars a day on that road, and they're all police officers. Like, we're okay. We don't need to close anything major, and we'll just have an officer at the end just to kind of do a soft closure. And so they ended up actually using that officer to drive through, to be the guy driving to the scene. And so he'd drive to one end, park, and go back and forth. And it worked out great. It was a great scene and a great sort of incorporation into the script, and very little had to be done.
I mean, and it's a lot of fun, but there is there's a positive economic impact, and there's telling the story. It's all, this spoke, it's a spoke in the wheel. It's all about making certain that we can tell our story, the money is changing hands, and then people live good, healthy, clean lives.
Well, Greg, let's expand on that, because you talk about that because people say, oh, well, you guys just want it because it looks good for the city. But the economic impact of that, I mean, when a production comes in.
When Paramount comes to town for 2.5 weeks and they bring 350 employees,
they're all in the hotel.
How much do you think they're going to impact this city and this community? Quite frankly, a lot. It's a lot. Restaurants, hotels, employment, it just goes on and on. There's the direct, but then there's also the indirect. And it's part of that economic package. We talk about different things, aerospace, ag, mining, Hollywood, whatever it happens to be, it's part of that well-balanced economic package.
Thom, as a filmmaker, I mean, as you mentioned, you needed something that looked like an earthquake scene, and WM was able to help you with that. And you've got historic buildings here. It's like you've got the sets are already made.
Well, but make no mistake, I need to talk to Larry about that pile of rubble. I'm not too happy about it.
It served a purpose.
No, I know exactly. It's not like it's a secret.
Actually, when I drove in last week, I looked over and I didn't see the pile. I wonder if
they've been getting rid of the pile. They've been chipping away at it.
But I mean, getting to your point about the economic benefits of filmmaking. So I have 4 scripts that I've written. 3, I'm shooting one next year on Florida feature film. And I have 3 others that are all set in Tehachapi. So you're probably going to be getting more calls from me in the years ahead.
But see, now you give them a little bit. You give them an inch, he wants a mile.
I was going to say, at some point you may need a permit.
I think the first one I'll be shooting in my house in Bear Valley, so I'll be covered on that one.
But just so you know, a film permit in the city is free. We just want to know who you are, what you're doing, and how we can support it. And if there is a large amount of public works or police support, we do need to get our costs recovered. But nothing compared to what it is in LA County or elsewhere.
Yeah.
Kern County and Tehachapi are very film friendly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know that working in law enforcement and getting to work some of those movie jobs, that was always something you kind of looked at. I was like, okay, what's the food for today?
Yep.
You don't, and we would be tied up for hours doing nothing. But here, you were so efficient. We walked out while you guys were out on the street and filming in front of BK. Very efficient. You had things moving, and it was not what I experienced being in the background of
as he pulls out temporary parking.
Temporary no parking from 7 a.m.
That's why we had
a.m.
to be efficient.
7 to 10.
I gave you 7 to 10 a.m. Right. 7 to 10 a.m. That was it.
So we knew that once the 10 a.m. rolled around, we had to be done.
Well, the businesses started to open.
That's
and
right.
so we need to make sure that we're not impacting businesses negatively.
And I know that, like I was kind of going with my experience, it would be a 16-hour shift. You'd be on site, and production, I mean, it was all set up, and the time and the amount of crew and people, and then we'd have, I remember maybe 10 minutes of actually filming out of all those hours and hours, and you had it moving. You were quick. You had the trust in the people that were there, but it was like we spent, 15 minutes just kind of watching from the outside, looking in, going, And my thought was, okay, we've got efficiency, and you had a plan.
We did have a plan, and by and large, it worked well. We knew we had 2 days to shoot this, basically. We ended up coming back a third day and did a couple of pickups at the Aria House, but we had 2 days to shoot, and we knew we had multiple recreations to shoot, 3 to 5 locations per day, which are company moves, and that's what eats up your time.
Yeah.
Working with older folks who were our interviewees, who we had to take our time with and give them plenty of time to say what they wanted to say at the museum where we interviewed them. Rehearse our actors, dress our actors, feed our actors, and we had 2 days. And we were everywhere from Denison to WM to Depot to BK and elsewhere. So we had to be efficient or we wouldn't have gotten it done. And I didn't frankly have the funding to pay my crew overtime money, and we paid everybody, by the way, the actors. That was really important to me, that even though it was going to be a kind of a stipend, we're going to employ the local community. We're going to make sure that they are compensated for their time. So we wanted to get down, I think our days were 9-hour days, basically.
And it really translated as you watch the film. The film 452, the Tehachapi Earthquake. It's available at the Tehachapi Museum.
Yeah, right now I think the museum's open just on weekends, correct?
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But I was just thinking maybe
yeah.
we could keep some of these at City Hall.
It's a great idea.
From the Heritage League, just get them on loaner and sell them at City Hall also, since we're open business hours Monday through Thursday.
Charles and Judith would be greatly appreciative of that.
Yeah, we have a little area up front with hats and shirts and different things. We could just
flags
incorporate
from the
that.
American Legion.
Yeah, the American Legion flag. So we're going to start a little gift store. But it's all for good. It's all promoting Tehachapi.
Yeah, and I don't know what they're selling it for, but it's very inexpensive.
I think $20.
Yeah, right. And I know what it costs to make these, so they have to sell a lot of them to get their money back, what they spent for the film. So they'll be very thankful for that.
Yeah, I'll talk to Charles. We'll get a handful at City Hall.
What was your feedback like after the premiere?
Super positive. I was surprised. Some people told me they cried. And I didn't, I can watch something that I make, and it's very hard for me to be objective about it. And so people seem to be moved by it. They seem to appreciate that we made, as I've said before, the effort to tell the real story and not make it flashy. And they were encouraged, as Peggy, one of our interviewees, said, "Thank you for just telling the story." That meant a lot to her as somebody who'd been through it.
Almost like closure a little bit. Maybe. Capture the whole package in 20 minutes, and it's a little bit of closure.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, it might be a stretch.
But no. I think that's the sense I got from her for sure. Yeah.
And the premiere, was sold out. 170 odd people. The Hitching Post, Will Viner graciously donated that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Will. But it was a great event.
I was very nervous because normally when not that I've had a lot of screenings, but I like to see what my film's going to look like before it's screened. And since the theater was donating the time, we didn't have time to get in there before to look at it. So I was sitting there seeing they had the image that you see on the front of the up on the screen. I was like, oh, please play properly. Yeah. And it looks fantastic. I mean, it's the first time I saw it blown up.
Hope I shot this in the right aspect ratio, so we're not like way outside the screen.
And that happens.
Yeah.
So Tom, anything in closing is, boy, we've really covered a lot of ground with this.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to see it. Greg saw it as well. Corey's not, but now that we've got a copy. But we would definitely want to send people over to the museum. And when you were in the museum, what's your takeaway from that to kind of plug what the museum has to offer? Mm-hmm. I know you did the interviews there. What's your kind of takeaway from our Tehachapi Museum?
So if you have not been to that museum, people listening to this, it's a must visit. It's really one of the finest small museums that I've been to. It sort of gives a nice overview of the city, of the history, and there's a lot in a very compact space, and that beautiful back room Native American exhibit too. But I think it does the city proud. And for people that might be coming in just for a day, it's a very easy one stop of several, perhaps, to get a taste of what happened in this place prior to the day that you came. So great little museum.
Well, you talk about community people. Mark and Jesse Milano, they donated the money for the extension on the back, the Native American. So thank you, Mark and Jesse. Yeah. I know Mayor Phil Smith and his wife Becky, they routinely donate money, and lots of people do. But the point to be made is that people give money and they give their time into Tehachapi, and the result is gyms like the Heritage League Museum and the Ray House across
Ray
the
House
street.
is amazing.
It's little gems here and there. They make a difference.
Tom, anything in closing that we didn't touch on, or that you thought, I want to make sure that I at least mention this, or did we hit all the points?
I would just say that, again, it was a pleasure to shoot here. I moved to Los Angeles from New York, January of '94, a couple of days before the Northridge earthquake. Matter of fact, my wife and I were in an empty apartment waiting for our furniture to be delivered from the East Coast. So we've been out here a long time. We consider ourselves Californians, I guess, after 30 years, we're good to go. So I felt like I was kind of meant to make this movie, given that the timing when we came out, and then moving to this community and becoming a part of the community and loving it. And I just was an honor to be able to make this film. And I hope to make a lot of films here, but if I never make another film here, I feel like I was part of something very special.
Well, you hit it out of the park. Congrats.
Thank you, Greg.
So our conversation today with Thom Mills, the writer, producer, director,
Editor?
Editor?
No,
Oh,
I have an
there you
editor,
go.
thank God. I did the string outs and rough cut, but I'm not an editor.
There you go.
But you helped tell the story of what occurred 70 years ago here in Tehachapi, and you did it very well, and really encourage people to seek this film out, whether as soon as we get it here at City Hall, but definitely stop by the museum, and then you can take in what the museum has to offer. You two guys are almost lifers here in Tehachapi. For me, it's 20 plus years, but I took away so much from getting a chance to sit there and watch it. And I think because of the audience that was there, it was even more impactful because you did see some of that emotion that you talked about, Tom.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things that kind of translated. I don't know if you noticed
No,
that,
I
Greg.
totally got that feeling.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For me, it was just more so about it's just about the pride in it all too. I mean, I've brought up a few times, and when we did our COVID reopening, I brought it up too. On Green Street, 70 years ago, the place was destroyed, and then here we are standing, recovering from yet another disaster, and that's just what we do. And so to continue to do that, I mean, very resilient people up here. So.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say one thing about Tehachapi in general, and I know a lot of that has to do with you three and many other people in town. But when people ask me about Tehachapi, what it's about, I usually say it's a special community that's growing, but I don't know how to actually articulate it. But
growing with a purpose.
Well, I say it seems to me as an outsider that it's a smart growth. It's a city that has a direction and a focus and a plan, but it's not getting. It's being watched over.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, folks, if you've got any questions regarding the film, you can send them to us at media@TehachapiCityHall.com. We'll get them to Tom. If you're seeking out the film, we encourage you to go over to the Tehachapi Museum and pick it up. And then as soon as we have it here at our front desk, we'll make sure that you're aware of that. And we just appreciate the time you spend with us here in TehachaPod. Tom, thank you for taking the time.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me in today.
Thank you.
We'll catch you again soon right here on TehachaPod.
TehachaPod is a conversation about Tehachapi designed for the people who live here or who would like to know more about this mountaintop community. If you have a question you would like answered, email media@TehachapiCityHall.com. We will try to answer it on a future episode of TehachaPod.